She had always loved music, but not in the way people expected. She didn't dream of fame or applause. Her music was her private world, a place where she could be herself without anyone judging her. She spent hours alone in her small apartment, practicing on a second-hand keyboard she had saved for months to buy. Each note she played was careful and precise, but also full of feeling. To anyone else, it might have sounded like just simple tunes. But to her, it was a conversation with life, with herself, and with the quiet moments that nobody noticed. It was a normal Tuesday morning when she received the unexpected invitation. She had been arranging her sheet music when her phone buzzed. The message was from a community center she had visited only a few times for casual music classes. They were hosting an event next weekend and asked if she could play a short tune. The message was casual, almost offhand, but it made her heart beat faster. A public performance had never been part of her plan. She hesitated. Would she be ready? Could she do it? The thought of playing in front of people made her nervous in a way she hadn't felt in years. After a few moments of thinking, she realized that the request was for something very small, just a simple tune to fill time. No big expectations, no pressure to impress anyone. It seemed harmless enough, so she agreed. She felt a mix of excitement and fear as she confirmed her participation. It wasn't often that someone outside her private circle asked her to play music, and even though it was just a minor role, she felt it was a step she might never get again. The days leading up to the event were full of anticipation. She practiced every day, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She wanted to make the simple tune sound as good as it could, even if nobody noticed. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine the room, the people, the small stage. She would picture the tune flowing from her fingers, imagining it might touch someone in ways words could not. The thought gave her courage. Even though she still worried that her music might not be enough, on the morning of the event, she woke early. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm light through her small window. She had a quick breakfast, trying to calm her nerves, and then gathered her things. Her keyboard was old, and the case was slightly worn, but it was reliable, and she had spent countless hours with it. She packed sheet music neatly in a folder and checked everything twice. Each step she took felt heavier than usual, weighed down by anticipation. When she arrived at the community center, the atmosphere was lively. Volunteers were moving chairs, setting up tables, and adjusting microphones. People were laughing and chatting, preparing for the event. She felt like an outsider at first, unsure of where she belonged. Some of the other performers were already there, warming up, testing their instruments. A few glanced at her politely, but most seemed focused on their own preparations. She reminded herself that she had agreed to play a simple tune, not to compete or impress anyone. The organizer greeted her warmly and guided her to the small stage. She placed her keyboard carefully on the stand and adjusted the height. Everything seemed so normal, yet her hands were trembling slightly as she touched the keys. She ran a few notes quietly, just to feel the instrument under her fingers. It sounded exactly as she hoped. The familiar feel of the keys calmed her nerves a little. Before she knew it, it was almost her turn. The event had started, and people were seated, chatting quietly. She could hear laughter and the shuffling of programs. Her heart was racing, but she reminded herself to breathe. The organizer came over and whispered that she would only need to play for a few minutes. A simple tune, just as planned. The reassurance helped. She nodded, took a deep breath, and waited for the cue as she looked around. She noticed the variety of people in the audience. Some were families, others elderly couples, a few young people who seemed distracted by their phones. None of them were paying attention to her yet. She felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. No one expected anything from her, which was comforting, but it also made her wonder if her music would even be noticed. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the room fade. In her mind, she pictured the tune she had practiced so many times. It was simple, yes, but it carried a feeling of calm and warmth. She reminded herself that she wasn't playing for recognition. She was playing because music was a part of her life, because it was something that could speak in ways words could not. With that thought, she felt a quiet confidence settle over her, When the organizer gave her the signal, she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but each one was clear and deliberate. She could hear the tune fill the small space, mixing with the ambient sounds of the event. People started to notice. Heads turned, and conversations quieted. The music was gentle, but it had a presence. A way of drawing attention without demanding it. As she continued, she felt herself relaxing. The initial nervousness melted away, replaced by a sense of connection with the keys, the melody, and the room. Her fingers moved naturally, as if they knew the path better than her conscious mind did. Each note was a reflection of her practice, her patience, and her love for music. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about sharing a part of herself, even in the simplest form. For a few minutes, the room changed. The chatter faded, and people leaned forward in their seats, listening. Some smiled, some closed their eyes, and others nodded to themselves. The music had a gentle power that made everyone pause and take notice. She felt a strange joy in knowing that something so small could create such an effect by the time she finished. The simple tune had become more than just a filler. It had a life of its own, carrying emotion and subtle energy through the room. The audience applauded softly at first, then with more enthusiasm. She was surprised, not expecting this reaction. She smiled quietly, feeling a warmth she had never experienced before. It was not about the applause, but about the recognition of her effort, the acknowledgement that her music had reached people after stepping down from the small stage. She was greeted by the organizer and a few attendees who complimented her. She felt a mix of embarrassment and pride. They spoke of the melody, the feeling it carried, and the way it seemed to touch the room. She thanked them politely, still processing the fact that her private passion had been shared in such a public way, as she packed up her keyboard and sheet music. She reflected on the experience. What had started as a simple request, a minor role, had become a moment of personal triumph. She realized that even small opportunities could lead to significant experiences if approached with sincerity and heart. The fear she had felt earlier seemed distant now, replaced by a quiet excitement for what might come next. On her way home, she walked slowly, carrying her keyboard carefully. The streets felt brighter, the air felt lighter. She kept replaying the tune in her mind, imagining the subtle smiles of the audience, the soft applause, the feeling of connection that had filled the room. It was a small event, but for her, it was the beginning of a new chapter in how she saw herself and her music. That night, she sat by her window, listening to the city around her, and played the tune again on her keyboard. It sounded familiar, yet different, filled now with the memory of being heard, being recognized, and feeling truly alive. She understood that this was only the start. A simple step into a larger world that had been waiting quietly for her talent to emerge. Her music had always been her companion, but now for the first time, it had companions of its own, the people who had listened, who had felt something she created, and who had acknowledged it. She smiled, knowing that this simple invitation had given her more than she could have imagined. After her first public performance, she felt a mix of relief and curiosity. People had listened, smiled, and clapped, but she knew there was much more to learn about herself and her music. She spent the next few days replaying the experience in her mind, thinking about the faces in the audience, the way the room had gone quiet, and the small smiles she had caught. It gave her confidence, but also a quiet awareness that performing in front of others brought challenges she hadn't faced in her private practice. She returned to her small apartment and began to think about what she had learned. The keyboard, once just a companion in solitude, now felt like a bridge to the world. She started to experiment more, trying new melodies and rhythms, testing how her music could reach people's hearts. The practice was different now. She played not just for herself, but with the thought that someone might listen, that her music might be felt. It was both exciting and intimidating. Her next opportunity came sooner than she expected. A friend of a friend had heard about her performance and mentioned her to another community group. They asked if she could play at their next gathering. At first, she hesitated. The audience would be larger, and she feared that the magic of her first performance might not happen again. What if she made a mistake? What if the audience didn't connect with her music? The thought made her nervous, but deep down, she felt a quiet determination. She wanted to grow, to see how far her music could reach. The day of the second performance arrived. She felt a familiar tension in her stomach. She packed her keyboard carefully. Making sure every detail was in order. Unlike before, she had to travel farther, navigate new streets, and arrive at a location she had never seen. The city around her was busy, full of people going about their day, unaware that she carried her music with her like a secret treasure. She found a quiet moment to sit on a bench, close her eyes, and play a few notes on a portable keyboard app on her phone. It was a small comfort, but it helped her center herself before stepping into a larger room filled with people she had never met. When she arrived at the venue, she noticed the difference immediately. The space was bigger, brighter, and busier. People were moving in and out, volunteers arranging chairs, a small stage set up with microphones and speakers. She felt her nerves grow, but she reminded herself that she had done this before, that she could rely on her hands, her ears, and her memory. She unpacked her keyboard carefully and began to warm up, feeling the familiar keys under her fingers. The notes felt alive, like old friends greeting her after a long time apart. The audience began to gather, and she noticed a wide range of expressions. Some people looked impatient, others curious, and a few seemed genuinely interested in what she would play. She realized that each person came with their own expectations, and she could not control them. She could only play as honestly as she could, and let the music speak for itself. That thought gave her a sense of calm. She had no desire to impress anyone artificially. She only wanted to share what she loved. When it was her turn, she stepped onto the small stage, feeling the lights warm against her face. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the hum of the room. She began with a simple tune as she had been asked, but slowly allowed herself to explore it more fully. The melody grew richer, more expressive. She played with intention, letting each note carry emotion, letting her fingers move naturally over the keys. She noticed how the audience leaned in, how their attention focused, and felt a quiet thrill. She was beginning to understand that her music could draw people in, even when they came with doubt or distraction. During the performance, she felt a connection she had never felt before. Each note seemed to reach the audience, and each reaction, subtle or pronounced, reflected back to her the power of her own expression. A soft smile from someone in the front row, the gentle nod of another, the quiet hush that fell over the room. These small moments made her heart swell. She realized that performing was not about being perfect. It was about being present, about offering a part of herself through the music. The more she embraced that, the more natural and confident her playing became. After the performance, people approached her, offering words of encouragement. Some spoke about the emotions her music evoked. Others asked about her practice and how she learned to play with such feeling. She listened carefully, feeling both humility and pride. She understood that each compliment was a reflection of her effort and patience, not just talent alone. She thanked them, feeling grateful that her music had touched even a few hearts. Each interaction reminded her that music was a shared experience, a way to connect, and that she had something valuable to give. That evening, she walked home slowly, letting the city lights and evening sounds wash over her. She replayed the performance in her mind, thinking about what had gone well and what she could improve. She felt a new sense of purpose. Music was no longer just a private refuge. It was a bridge to people, a way to communicate without words. The realization was exciting, but also carried responsibility. She understood that every note she played had the potential to affect others, and that thought made her want to practice more, learn more, and grow more. Over the next few weeks, she continued to practice diligently. She experimented with new melodies, tried improvisations, and studied different styles. She also began to observe people more closely, noticing how they responded to music, how a certain rhythm could lift spirits, or how a gentle tune could soothe tension. She realized that her music was not just about sound, but about empathy and understanding. Each performance, even small, taught her more about human connection than she had ever expected. She also faced moments of doubt. Sometimes she worried that her music was too simple, too quiet, or not good enough for bigger audiences. But she learned to manage those thoughts, reminding herself that sincerity mattered more than showmanship. Each performance was a learning experience, a chance to share something honest and human. The fear became a companion, not a barrier, helping her to focus, to prepare, and to give her best. One day, she was invited to play at a small festival. It was an entirely new experience, with more people, different instruments, and an unfamiliar environment. She felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She prepared carefully, practicing the tunes she knew would resonate, but also allowing space for spontaneity. When the moment came, she played with all her attention on the music and the audience, feeling the room respond to her presence. The experience was overwhelming, but it confirmed what she had begun to understand. Her music had the power to connect, to move, and to inspire. Through these performances, she discovered a deeper truth about herself. Music was not just a skill. It was a way of seeing the world, of feeling deeply, and of communicating what words could not. She learned to listen, not just to her instrument, but to the audience, to the energy in the room, to the subtle shifts in mood. Each note was a conversation, and she realized that performing was not a one-way act, but a dialogue. She had entered a new world, one where she was both student and teacher, listener and speaker, observer and participant. By the end of the second part of her journey, she had transformed quietly but profoundly. She was no longer the shy, private musician who played only for herself. She had begun to step into a larger space, discovering confidence, empathy, and the joy of shared experience. She understood that the path ahead would have challenges, that there would be moments of doubt, and that not every performance would be perfect. But she also knew that every note she played carried a piece of her heart, and that was more important than anything else. The stage, once intimidating, was becoming a place where she could truly belong, and where her music could speak for her in ways words never could. She had grown more confident in her abilities. But nothing prepared her for the challenge of the third performance. It was a larger venue, in a hall that could hold hundreds of people. The organizers had told her it was a small interlude between speeches and other acts, just a simple tune to fill the space. Despite the words simple and short, she felt a strange pressure building inside her. She had already experienced small audiences, but this was different. The room was vast, the stage elevated, and the lights brighter. It was easy to feel invisible or overwhelmed in such a space. The day of the performance, she woke early, her heart racing. She rehearsed a few pieces quietly at home, her fingers moving across the keyboard with precision and care. She reminded herself of all the time she had practiced alone, of the hours spent perfecting even the smallest details. That practice, she realized, had prepared her for this moment, even if she could not see the outcome yet. She packed her keyboard, her sheet music, and a small notebook of notes she kept about melodies, rhythms, and feelings she wanted to express. Arriving at the hall, she was struck by its size. Rows of chairs extended far into the distance, a stage framed by curtains, and microphones set up with cables stretching across the floor. Volunteers were running back and forth, setting up equipment, checking sound systems, and making last-minute adjustments. The air was filled with energy, a mixture of excitement and tension. She felt small in comparison, but she tried to focus on the familiar comfort of her keyboard. That instrument had always been her anchor, and it would guide her through this unfamiliar territory as she warmed up on stage. Testing the keys and adjusting the sound, she noticed people entering the hall. Families, older couples, and young adults all took their seats, chatting softly. She could see curiosity in some eyes and doubt in others. The thought crossed her mind. What if they don't appreciate the music? What if it is too simple, too quiet for such a large space? She took a deep breath and reminded herself that this performance was about honesty, not about proving anything. Her hands moved over the keys, tracing the melodies she knew by heart. The sound filled the room differently here, echoing in corners she had never imagined. It was both thrilling and intimidating. When the cue came, she began to play the simple tune. The first few notes were tentative, careful, but gradually she let the music flow naturally. She had prepared for simplicity, but as she played, she realized she could add depth without altering the melody itself. Subtle variations in timing, small shifts in emphasis, and the gentle rise and fall of each phrase made the tune richer. She was conscious of the audience, feeling the energy in the room, but she did not let it control her. Instead, she let it guide her expression, letting each note speak for itself and for her. The audience started to respond quietly at first. Heads turned, conversations ceased, and even the staff working in the back seemed drawn to the music. She noticed a few people leaning forward, closing their eyes, or tapping fingers along with the rhythm. The effect was subtle, but powerful. She felt a connection, something intangible that went beyond words between her and everyone. Listening. Her music had begun to fill the room not just with sound, but with feeling. As she continued, she took small risks, allowing herself to explore dynamics, soft passages, and moments of intensity. She could sense the audience reacting without seeing it directly. Some smiled, some nodded, and others seemed completely absorbed. She realized that music was more than just playing notes correctly. It was about creating an experience, guiding people through emotions, and allowing them to see her thoughts and feelings through sound. The simple tune she had been asked to play had become something more alive and meaningful in her hands. During the performance, she felt a strange mixture of control and freedom. Her years of practice allowed her fingers to move without thinking, while her mind focused on the feeling she wanted to share. Each note became a sentence in a story, each phrase a paragraph, and the entire tune a message to the audience. She felt herself becoming part of the room, part of the moment, as the boundaries between performer and listener blurred. The music carried them together, creating a space of shared experience and quiet wonder. When she finished, the silence hung for a moment, then broke into applause. The clapping started softly, then grew, filling the hall with warmth and appreciation. She felt a rush of emotion she had never anticipated. The recognition was not just about her skill, but about the sincerity and heart she had put into the music. People came forward, shaking her hand, asking questions, expressing gratitude for the experience she had created. Their words were simple, but they meant everything. They had been touched by something small, yet profound. Something that came from her alone. After the performance, she packed her keyboard and notes, feeling both exhilarated and drained. She realized that performing was not only about skill, but also about endurance and focus. The larger space, the bigger audience, and the heightened expectations had tested her in ways she had not expected. Yet through it all, she had stayed true to her music, and it had responded in kind. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not from applause alone, but from knowing she had given herself fully to the music and to the people listening. Walking home later, she reflected on the experience. She understood that each performance was a lesson, a chance to grow and to discover new depths in herself and her music. The fear she had felt earlier was no longer a barrier, but a companion. It's reminding her to stay focused, to breathe, and to trust herself. She also realized that the connection between performer and audience was fragile but powerful, and that even a simple tune could create moments of genuine human connection. Over the next few days, she returned to her practice with renewed purpose. She experimented with variations on the simple tune, testing how small changes could affect emotion, pacing, and feeling. She listened to recordings, studied techniques, and reflected on the responses she had received. Each day added more understanding of her craft, more confidence in her abilities, more insight into the subtle art of touching hearts through music. She also began to think about the future differently. Before these performances, she had played only for herself, keeping her music private and quiet. Now, she saw the potential of sharing her gift more broadly, reaching people who might never have heard such melodies otherwise. She imagined small concerts, community events, and perhaps even larger stages. The possibilities were both exciting and daunting, but she felt ready to explore them. Her music had become a bridge to the world, and she wanted to see where it could lead. Through these experiences, she discovered patience, humility, and resilience. Not every audience would respond as she hoped, not every performance would be flawless, and not every opportunity would feel natural. But she learned to embrace the uncertainty. to focus on the process rather than the outcome, and to trust that her music would find its way. Each performance, even one meant to be simple and brief, became a lesson in presence, awareness, and authenticity. By the end of this part of her journey, she had changed in ways she could barely articulate. The shy, reserved musician who once played only for herself had become someone capable of connecting with others through her art. She had discovered that simplicity did not mean insignificance, that a small tune could carry immense meaning if played with sincerity. And she had realized that the stage, no matter how intimidating, was not just a place to perform but a space to share, to connect, and to grow. The fourth performance arrived, and with it, a mix of excitement and apprehension. This time she was not just filling a space with a simple tune. The organizers had hinted that the audience might pay more attention because of the event's scale. The hall was larger than any she had played in before, with rows stretching far into the distance and a stage that felt like it could hold an entire orchestra. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unpacked her keyboard, but she reminded herself that she had grown through the past performances and that she was ready. She began her warm-up, running through scales and familiar tunes to feel the keys beneath her fingers. The sound carried differently here, echoing in ways she had never experienced before. It was both thrilling and intimidating. The audience began to arrive, filling the seats gradually. She observed them quietly, noticing the way some scanned programs. Others chatted softly, and a few looked curiously toward the stage. She felt the familiar nervous energy, but this time she tried to welcome it, letting it remind her that she was alive, that her music had the potential to reach others. When the signal came for her to start, she took a deep breath and sat down at the keyboard. The simple tune she was asked to play flowed naturally from her fingers. She began softly, cautiously, just as before, but then she allowed herself to explore the melody more deeply. She added subtle variations, gentle dynamics, and small flourishes that enhanced the tune without overpowering it. Her heart focused on each note, each pause, each breath. Letting the music carry her forward as she played, she noticed the audience responding in ways she had not seen before. People leaned forward, closed their eyes, nodded along, and smiled. Some whispered quietly to one another, pointing out moments that moved them. The music had a presence that filled the hall, commanding attention without demanding it. She realized that she was no longer simply performing. She was guiding the audience through a shared experience. Each note was a bridge, connecting her heart to theirs. She became more confident as the performance continued. The music, which had begun as a simple tune, transformed under her hands. She allowed herself to add layers of expression pauses that gave space for reflection, gentle rises and falls that created emotion, and subtle rhythms that invited movement without words. She was aware of the audience's reactions, but she did not let them dictate her playing. Instead, she used their energy to fuel her own expression, creating a dialogue between performer and listener. The feeling of control and freedom was exhilarating. She realized that she could shape the experience in ways that went beyond technique. Her music carried meaning because it came from a place of authenticity. Each phrase, each chord, each carefully placed note told a story of patience, growth, and quiet strength. The audience responded intuitively, sensing the emotion and honesty behind the performance. It was a moment of mutual understanding, a connection that transcended words and left a lasting impression. As the tune progressed, she found herself fully immersed in the music. She played with intention and feeling, allowing the simple melody to evolve naturally. The performance became more than she had anticipated, a living, breathing expression of her dedication and love for music. She could feel the audience's focus, their attention giving her courage, and she responded in kind, letting her hands express the emotions that she could not fully articulate with words alone. When she reached the final notes, the room fell silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone collectively held their breath, savoring the conclusion. Then the applause erupted, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each second. People stood, clapped, and cheered, moved by something they had not expected from what began as a simple tune. She felt a surge of emotion, pride, gratitude, joy, all mingling together. The recognition was not about fame or status, but about the shared human experience she had created through music. After stepping off the stage, she was met by organizers and audience members who spoke with genuine admiration. They asked questions about her practice, her inspiration, and the choices she had made during the performance. She listened carefully, feeling both humbled and affirmed. Their words reminded her that the effort, care, and sincerity she poured into her music were noticed and appreciated. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Knowing that her quiet dedication had resonated with others in meaningful ways, the experience left her reflective. She realized that she had grown immensely as a performer. It's not because of technique alone, but because of her willingness to engage fully, to be present, and to share herself through her music. She understood that the stage was no longer a place of fear or uncertainty, but a space where she could express herself authentically and connect with others. The simple tune that had started her journey had become a vehicle for self-expression and connection, revealing the power of honesty and presence. Over the following days, she continued to practice and reflect. She experimented with new ways to express emotion, exploring dynamics, tempo, and phrasing. She also thought about her own growth, recognizing how each performance had built on the last, gradually expanding her confidence and her understanding of music as a form of communication. She wrote notes in her notebook, recording ideas, feelings, and observations about each performance, creating a personal guide to her evolving artistry. She also became aware of the subtle ways her performances affected others. People who had once doubted her now sought her out, expressing interest and admiration. She recognized the impact her music could have on individuals, lifting spirits, offering comfort, and inspiring joy. The responsibility was not burdensome. It was motivating. She felt a renewed commitment to her craft, understanding that her music was a gift that could be shared and that the simple act of playing with sincerity had the power to touch lives. Her fourth performance marked a turning point. She had moved from tentative participation to confident expression, from uncertainty to ownership of her space on stage. She realized that her journey was not only about skill, but also about courage, patience, and openness. She had learned to trust herself, to trust her music, and to trust the connection that could form between performer and audience. Each performance, no matter the size or simplicity, became an opportunity to grow, to communicate, and to create moments of beauty. By the end of this part of her journey, she understood that music was more than an activity or hobby. It was a living, breathing part of herself that could reach out to others. She had discovered the joy of connection, the power of presence, and the meaning of expressing authenticity through her art. The stage, once intimidating, had become a place of empowerment and discovery, and she felt ready to continue exploring the potential of her music in ways she had never imagined. The simple tune had transformed into something far greater than she had ever expected. And she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to grow with each note she played. The fifth performance was unlike any she had experienced before. Word of her previous performances had spread quietly but steadily, and the event organizers invited her to play for a much larger crowd. It was no longer a minor interlude or a simple tune to fill a gap. It was a featured moment in the program, a chance to showcase her talent fully. The news both thrilled and unnerved her. She knew the audience would have higher expectations, but she also felt a quiet determination to rise to the occasion. In the days leading up to the performance, she practiced more intensely than ever. She explored variations on familiar melodies, created new combinations of rhythms, and experimented with emotional expressions she had not yet tried in public. She recorded herself, listened carefully, and made notes about what worked and what could be improved. Her small notebook became a map of her growth, filled with observations, ideas, and reflections. She was meticulous, but not rigid. She knew that the performance needed room to breathe and evolve naturally, just as it had in previous events. On the morning of the performance, she woke early, her mind buzzing with anticipation. She rehearsed quietly at home, feeling the keys beneath her fingers and letting her thoughts focus entirely on the music. Every note, every chord, every subtle shift of tempo was considered with care. She reminded herself that her journey had been built on patience, dedication, and authenticity. She was not playing to impress, but to share a piece of herself. That thought grounded her and helped to calm her nerves. Arriving at the venue, she was struck by the size and energy of the hall. The seats stretched back farther than she could see, and the stage was elevated and well lit. Volunteers and staff moved about quickly, checking equipment, adjusting microphones, and ensuring everything was ready. She unpacked her keyboard, carefully checking every connection and key. The sound carried differently in this hall, bouncing off walls and filling the air with resonance she had never experienced before. It was both exhilarating and intimidating. People began to fill the seats, and she observed them quietly. There were families, elderly couples, young adults, and children, all looking forward to the event. Some faces reflected curiosity, others doubt, and a few bore the hint of expectation from hearing about her prior performances. She felt a mix of nerves and excitement, but reminded herself to focus on the music. Each person in the audience represented a connection, a chance to touch a heart, and that thought gave her courage. When the moment came, she stepped onto the stage and sat at her keyboard. The lights were warm against her face, the microphones ready, and the audience watching quietly. She closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath, and let the first notes flow naturally. The simple tune she had been asked to play began softly, almost tentatively, but then she allowed herself to explore it fully. Subtle variations, gentle dynamics, and expressive phrasing transformed the familiar melody into something vibrant and alive. As she played, she felt a profound connection with the audience. The room seemed to quiet itself, as if everyone collectively held their breath to listen. She noticed subtle reactions. A smile here, a nod there, a soft intake of breath as a phrase unfolded. These small gestures told her that her music was reaching them, resonating in ways that words could not. The sense of shared experience was powerful and humbling. Reinforcing the belief that her music could touch hearts, she began to expand the tune, adding layers of emotion without breaking its simplicity. Moments of intensity and softness alternated, creating a narrative through sound. She allowed pauses to linger, giving space for reflection, and let crescendos build naturally, carrying the audience along with the music. Her fingers moved with confidence and grace, guided by years of practice and a deep understanding of the melody's essence. She had grown not just as a musician, but as a communicator. Using her music to tell a story without words, the audience's response was immediate and genuine. People leaned forward, closed their eyes, and let the music wash over them. Some whispered to one another in awe, pointing out how the melody felt alive, how it seemed to tell a story of patience, growth, and quiet strength. The applause that followed each section of the tune encouraged her, but she focused on maintaining the emotional flow rather than seeking validation. She understood that true connection came from honesty, not performance for applause. As the final notes approached, she felt a sense of completion and fulfillment. The simple tune had evolved into a profound expression, carrying with it the culmination of her journey from private practice to public recognition. When the last note faded, the hall held a brief silence, then erupted into enthusiastic applause. The reaction was overwhelming. People stood, clapped, and cheered, moved by the sincerity and beauty of her performance. She felt a surge of emotion, joy, gratitude, pride mingling together. After stepping off the stage, she was met by organizers and audience members who expressed admiration and curiosity. They asked about her practice, inspiration, and the choices she had made during the performance. She answered with humility, explaining that her music came from patience, dedication, and the desire to share something meaningful. Their words of encouragement and recognition reinforced her belief in the power of music to connect people and create moments of shared humanity. The experience left her reflective and inspired. She understood that the journey had been as important as the destination. Each performance, no matter how small, had contributed to her growth and confidence. She had learned patience, resilience, the value of sincerity in her art. She had discovered that a simple tune, played with care and authenticity, could become a powerful tool for connection and expression. Her music had evolved from a private practice into a gift that could touch the hearts of many. In the days following the performance, she continued to practice, experiment, and explore. She developed new melodies, refined existing ones, and reflected on the emotional impact of her music. She recognized that her journey was ongoing, that each performance offered new lessons and opportunities for growth. She also felt a deep appreciation for the audiences she had encountered. Understanding that their openness and attention had shaped her evolution as a performer, she realized that her music was more than a personal passion. It was a bridge between herself and others. Each note carried emotion, intention, and connection, and each performance was a chance to create a shared experience. She had learned that true artistry came not from technical skill alone, but from authenticity, empathy, and presence. The stage had become a place of empowerment, reflection, and joy by the end of this part of her journey. She had fully embraced her role as a musician, capable of touching lives through her art. The simple tune that began as a minor request had transformed into a powerful expression of her dedication, growth, and heart. She understood that the path ahead would continue to offer challenges and opportunities, but she felt ready to face them with confidence, courage, and sincerity. Her music had become a part of her identity, a way to communicate, connect, and inspire. And she looked forward to the future with hope and excitement.